Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month we are discussing healing our communities. It's a tribute to National Wellness Month in the United States. I remember when we had that scholastic kind of presidential, thing we had to make our physical health. But we know it's more than that. We have a new guest with us, but her name is Beth Thorp. How do you say the last name? I apologize. Beth.
That's okay. It's Thorp.
Beth Thorp.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight. I did have a quote that I was going to share. It's from Margaret J. Wheatley. She says, "There is no power for change greater than the community discovering what it cares about." A lot of times we make the problems may be complex, but the reasons why we do it are simple. Sometimes if we really think about it. I just want to I'm sorry to bring you in, but thank you, Beth, for joining us today and sharing your insight. It never is easy sometimes to share some of these conversations, but it is an important one. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
A disclaimer for those in the United States, we have 988 has been, established so far. For if you are in crisis, but wherever you are in the world, we encourage you to find what resources, because resources look different for everyone, because there's different contexts. I know people say it better than me, Beth, so I have a couple quotes, but I'm just gonna use this simple one. I know I first was gonna go one route, but it's from Confucius. He says, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." It's sometimes the small steps. So what comes to mind when you hear this, and anything else you want to share? I know that I had another quote in mind, and I'm just pulling it out there. So what are your thoughts of this simple but I think meaningful quote?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, you can think about moving mountains, but it takes one act of kindness toward another individual or person, those small steps that can really make a difference in a person's life. So I'm all for community. That's everything that I am about, especially with our foundation here locally. We were actually honored with the 2022 Community Impact Award.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
That was through our Carlsbad. Literally 2 months ago, just got honored with that. It was such an honor. So it meant a lot to us and our foundation that we'll talk about here in a minute, that we are making an impact.
Yeah, it's a lot of times we kind of, it's that one thought, especially when I was thinking about, like, sometimes we try to solve problems by looking at the symptoms of what's happening instead of what some of the roots, what are the causes, and even just what we say to each other really matters. How we treat one another matter. I see this firsthand when I do groups. A lot of times we look at the tangible resources and we don't really notice that there's so much more there. So
I'm totally in agreement. Because my thought process and with the foundation, we're very community minded, that it's so important for communities to have a community. Some people don't have a community because it's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of a social connection with people. It's a sense of coming together and being better as a community to help one another. You can reach goals, and when they say when more and one grow together and come together, you are so much stronger.
Yeah.
And it makes for, I believe, a more fulfilling life. And that's what I feel.
Yeah, and I feel, again, thank you, Beth, for coming on. And I always, new guests, I want to give the opportunity to those who are listening, those who are watching, to learn, know a little bit more about you. So, Beth, could you share for those listening a little about your story, what brought you where you are, a little bit, your foundation, and go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, I'm the executive director of the Mitchell Thorp Foundation, and our mission is to support families with children with life-threatening illnesses, diseases, and disorders by providing financial, emotional, spiritual, and resources to these families in their desperate situation. So the foundation was started in memory of my son Mitchell. That took us across the United States, in and out of different hospitals, looking for answers. And it was a 5-year, very long, hard journey. Symptoms came on at the age of 13, and he ended up passing at 18 from an undiagnosed illness. So that was challenging. I mean, literally trying to find and racing to doctors to find what was causing his issue. He ultimately passed, and like I said, at 18, which was so tragic and so difficult for my family. But what happened for us, the miracle behind all of it, was the community. Again, we're talking about community, heard about our story. So this was back in 2008, when social media wasn't really out there, podcasts weren't out there. You know, anything we had to learn about was in print. Even, and that wasn't that long ago, if you think about it.
No.
And so we had to put Mitchell's story out in the newspaper here, and just thinking if people heard of these symptoms, has anyone experiencing these symptoms. But anyway, the community began to follow our story, and the community came out. A very good friend of ours, 2 friends of ours, knew how much, because I had to leave my job to stay by my son, obviously, to care for him. But that's what happens, is then the bills keep coming in, all those medical bills, they don't stop coming in. So the family, they came to us and said, when we left the last hospital, we had a $100,000 medical bill, and that's even with good insurance. And, you know, but as parents, you go to the ends of the earth. We would have sold the house. We would have been bankrupt. We would have done whatever we needed to do to care for our child and to keep him here. And that's what parents do. But the community heard about our situation. They came to us and said, you know, we want to help you. And they formed the very first, what we call a walkathon at that time. So they created a walkathon, and in the community, there was close to 700 people that showed up. People we didn't even know. That word came out to walk for us, to help us pay off that $70,000 medical bill. That forever changed us, my husband and I, and my family, my whole family unit. It changed us. We were never the same, and we wanted to pay that forward. So until this day, we're on our 14th annual Warrior Spirit 5K Run, Walk, and Family Festival. So we've been doing it every year, but now we're helping other families and children going through what we went through. So Mitchell's legacy is carrying on.
That's wonderful. A lot of times, unfortunately, resources are like silos. You don't know where's every being, you know, working in the mental health field. I know how some resources are just right there, but if you're not connected to or even know about it, it can be one of those barriers that, you know, can be frustrating. If you know it's if we, and I love what you're doing, you're providing this avenue for families to find these resources more readily, and you know, it's wonderful work. A lot of times, like I said, you know, when we think of resources, there's so many aspects. You talk about spiritual, you talk about, just tangible, of course, informational, now like, and just understanding. I am really sorry for your loss, but I'm really inspired by what you're doing and how to continue moving forward, which kind of segues to what helped you move past. This must have been really tragic. I know you mentioned the community. What did not help? I like that question. Like when I asked both questions, like what helped you move past it and what did not help? And a lot of times people, I find it helpful sometimes because we get stuck sometimes. So what helped you past this negative part in your life, and what didn't help?
Right. Well, like I said, it's anyone losing someone that they love so much. Usually they say the stronger the love for that person, the harder the grief. And it took us, and I say us, my husband and I, and personally myself, 5 years in it, 2 years to come out through the healing process of it all. So this did not happen overnight. When people think, when they see where I am today, it was a long journey of crawling back out of it. Luckily, my faith is very strong, and my husband's as well. And we had to literally get one-on-one spiritual counseling in our case, to work with us individually, just to break things off. It started with forgiveness. That's where it started. To forgive doctors that couldn't find the cure. Forgive family members that said things that they shouldn't have said. Forgiving people who did things they shouldn't have done. All that builds up. right? And
Yeah.
you realize it keeps building up inside your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about releasing the past so you can make room for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really through that healing session that my husband and I went through, the very next day, it was almost like a transformation. I don't know how to explain it, but we were transformed people. And I looked at my husband and I said, I do not want to do anything else on this planet unless it has eternal significance. And he looked at me and went, you know, I kind of feel the same way too. So that is when, you know, in my deepest pain of grief, and I don't know if your audience is a spiritual group, but for me, God spoke deep within my spirit, not audible, but just and illuminated my mind. And he said to me, this is not the end. This is the beginning. And I kind of sat up in my bed and said, what does that mean? What? I didn't quite know what that meant, right? And so my husband came back and he was at the church the week, that same week. And my husband played baseball, so he, with the Los Angeles Dodgers, so he coached a lot of boys in the community. So the boys he was coaching had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, one had lymphoma, both families trying to make ends meet. And again, that strong spirit spoke to him saying, you know, we need to form a bridge and help other families going through what we went through. So he came home to tell me that. He said, I think we should start a foundation. So that's how it was born. And we were like, we've never looked back. We gave up our previous careers for what we were doing and moved this foundation forward. Now we're all going on our 14th year, giving back $2.8 million back into the community, helping families and children. I've lost count. That we've helped countless numbers.
Yeah, you know, I just love what you mentioned about forgiveness. I loved how, Revive Ministries doesn't proselytize, but I encourage hope. You know, I encourage that. For me, I am faith-based. I do believe a lot of times when I think of when I started Revive Ministries, similarly enough, it was just, this drive. I want to kind of have an avenue where people could talk, freely and talk about stuff that may be a little bit messy, but inspire hope. And that's exactly what you're doing here. And I do also want to mention that, a lot of times when we think about these, I read a book from Viktor Frankl. I still remember reading just this one portion when he talked about some of the other prisoners in the concentration camps, and people were giving half their bread and they're hopeful. Those are the people who usually survive. People would say, well, you're giving half your stuff. You need to maintain your health. But I feel that Viktor Frankl is kind of noting that there is this hope, this idea that there's another day forward, that kind of, that he saw that these people who really made it, who were the ones who survived, were the ones who thought there was another day. It wasn't just, it wasn't just, it wasn't just what do I need, tangibly, but what do I need to purpose-wise? What do I drive? What do I focus on? And, it's inspiring to, a lot of people say, well, you went through so much. Why are you going all this? That's why. A lot of times when I think of my journey, it was, the giving back, the serving others became my healing. Became the hurt's still there, but it changes.
Yeah.
It just. Yeah, so
that's so true. It's like you take your pain and move it into purpose.
Yeah.
And not everyone knows how to do that, but you can. It's a way of the way you get out of it. And I think that was one way of God's way of healing my family and my husband and I, because it nearly tore us apart, obviously, but was to get out of ourselves to help others and serve others. And when you can begin to do that, that is when you begin to, like you say, start to heal yourself in the back. So it's very rewarding for us now to, go into the hospital rooms and meet with these young families, and they're struggling, and we know how they're struggling because financially it's a burden, and it's so hard on the whole family unit, even right down to the siblings. They get forgotten. So we have programs in place under the foundation, our medical and home assistance, our healing and rehabilitation programs, We have a conversion wheelchair van program, and we even have a youth leadership program that we train students, the next generation, from 8th through 12th grade, what it means to be good servant leaders in their community.
That's wonderful. I think leadership programs, a lot of times when I'm dealing with some of the youth in the church, they are like, well, I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to be a leader. But I think when you're able to connect and understand, in context of faith-based, your gifts, God's gifts to you, but also just inspiring, the comfort zone sometimes can make us kind of stagnant, but moving past that. I want to ask you, not to segue, but we are talking about healing our community. It seems like you have, with 14 years, that's a lot of experience. What has been your insight on this particular topic? What has worked? You've been working with the community. It seems like it's a big passion for you. What has worked? What hasn't worked in regards to?
Well, first of all, for us to even do what we needed to do, we really didn't know our first steps, but we first needed to hit the city and go before them to get all our permits. And the first step that we took was me standing and my husband for the city council and addressing them that we wanted a ball field renamed in my son's honor to Thorp Field. And we had to that was my first attempt of addressing the city council and having them hear me at this grieving mother, standing before them and telling them the reasons why it would be a wonderful thing to do. And all our 5K is actually, that's where our launching pad is from that place. And plus we hold baseball tournaments there we hold it during Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, the whole month of September. So all those things we had to present to them. But I think good community is one, you need to have a shared identity. And I had to have them see the vision with me.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And I had to have a shared purpose. And what do they get out of it besides what we were asking for?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
And then you have to have common objectives. So there's we were first pushing to get the ball field renamed, and then we would maintain the ball field, and we were going to get baseball scholarships out of it. And, you start thinking about, and it's good for the community. It's good, shows good face, right? To do things like this. And then you have to give them shared interests or passions of our vision. It's like casting that vision forward and just kind of having a common behavior of likeness and hoping for the best, that they would agree to everything that we pitched. And that was the first step for us. I mean, we had to literally pitch it to the city council, and then when they finally came back 3 or 4 days later and said, Mr. and Mrs. Thorp, we want to congratulate you. Yes, we will rename. It was just called Field 1. We're going to rename Field 1 to Thorp Field. And that's where we began to hold our very first event there. And that once we started doing that, we noticed how the community kept coming out to help our other families that we were supporting. And we've had people come up to the stage to us and just say, thank you for putting this on. They'd say, I just feel like I'm more connected and to the community. And when you start hearing things like that, you're like, wow, you don't really realize that impact you're doing, because we were just trying to do what we thought to help families. And the best way we know how, by putting on these events. And sure enough, lo and behold, 14 years later, we've been known as the most inspirational run walk in the region. So people come out because they get inspired when they come to our events, and we have quotes along the walk and the run path. You can do it, and all these inspirational quotes, that inspire them. And then when they listen to our families, when they stand up on stage to speak how the foundation has helped them, and oh my gosh, there's not a dry eye in the place.
That's just I feel it's called active listening. I feel when you're pitching that many times, you have to really feel the tone of the people around you, the people you're working with, people inspiring. To get people to see the same vision is not easy, because you're talking about there's cultural differences, there's different demographics, all this stuff, and you're still able to inspire, which in itself is inspiring. It's hard to communicate these things effectively, and it feels you guys have been doing that well these last 14 years. I appreciate all you've done so far. I want to share a quote since you mentioned quotes. It's from Hunter S. Thompson. He said, "Who is the happier man? He who has braved the storm of life and lived, or he who has stayed securely on shore and merely existed?"
Ooh.
So a lot of times, we get. I feel a lot of times the most inspiring stories or inspiring is when there is this tension, but it's also persevering. And I do appreciate what you're doing for the community. I remember just thinking about National Wellness Month as a kid. It was just one of those days when you had the presidential award where you have to like do pull-ups and stuff like that month and whatever. But I just really I appreciate how we're just making it more connected when it comes to community healing. I feel I think healing comes from obviously with your family. I remember the idea of forgiveness, but also community aspect is nothing to be ignored, and I really appreciate that. So,
yes, thank you.
a lot of times when you build that, you build a lot of times value is a lot of times not valued, but also accountability is when you're in a safe community and space, you're able to improve yourself because you don't have these rigid perfectionist ideals. You're like, well, I have things to grow, but when you're around positive community, I feel that the healing can actually happen because there's not so much avoidance. When you inspire people, they do want to be better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They do want to help, and we inspire. You have to inspire the vision. You have to model the way.
Mm-hmm.
As Diamond Fairies, you have to inspire that vision, and get people to see your vision in a sense when they come to the events, and you can do that with any community. And I often thought to myself, wow, the world would be a much better place if communities would just all come together. Mm-hmm. Because if you can have your communities come together throughout the nation, it's almost as like you're looking out for each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's just helping each other. It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of connection. It's a sense to reach out to people for help. And you don't feel isolated. And that's a bad thing for people. That isolation is not good. And I think communities help bring people together. And I think we need more of that. More of a positive community, not what's happening in the world today. We see a lot of negativity and tearing down communities, and just they're getting away from the true meaning of what love is. Love thy neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor. And it's hard for people sometimes to do that. But then again, there's people they have a big, generous heart, and they don't know how to do it. But you can find many things in your community to get involved in, like food banks or whatever interests you, that you could do something in your community to give back. Whatever fills your heart. Some people like working with animals. Some people like feeding the hungry. Some people, whatever it is, just find one thing that you feel you can give your time, treasure, and talent to, and you'll watch yourself start to change.
Yeah, and you just hit exactly what I was trying to get on with the whole community aspect. Unfortunately, what the negative portion sometimes kind of inspires this kind of action, a silent acknowledgement. When you have two people feel the same way in the community, they don't communicate, they're thinking the same thing. And this is a word in Chile, I'm not going to try to pronounce that is super long, but it's a silent acknowledgement and understanding between two people who are both wishing and thinking the same thing. When you have a healthy, positive community, we can actually talk about these things. We're talking about right now. Well, sometimes the silence in community, I remember this one quote, it's like, it's the person, it's not so much what the enemies has done to me, it's what my neighbors, when they were quiet, when my friends were quiet when I needed them most, when my community was quiet. And I feel like when I read this word, my wife has this word of untranslatable words in different languages, and this is one. And I find it haunting because sometimes people think, well, the person who persecuted me or hurt me yeah, I'm upset with them, but I'm more upset of the community that said that they're around me, there for me, being silent. So I feel when we have the community that embraces each other and tries to watch out for each other with their own abilities and skill sets, I feel what you're doing is just very much needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, any final thoughts? Those who are listening, you could get all the links will be in the notes. But any final thoughts you want to share with those listening? Anything? Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, I just wrote a book that got launched the end of June, so it's been launched worldwide. It's titled A New Creation. It'll be in the links, but it'll talk a lot about our personal journey and how we got through many things and how we were overcomers of several things and how we got through it all. So there's some really great nuggets in there, and for me, a lot of God's promises. It is faith-based genre, but it's also a true story. It's a true inspirational story that'll move your spirit to start to take action. And that is, if you're stuck and you feel like you need to get out of the rut you're in, this might be a great book for you to look at. Anywhere books are sold, A New Creation, or you can get a personal signed autographed copy by me at anewcreation.org.
And like I said, all this will be in the notes. Just scroll down, you'll see it. You can click on the link and you'll find out more of how you can obtain the book or the signed book. Thank you, Beth, so much for just coming on, sharing your insight, your inspiring story, what you're doing for the community. We just need more of this, I feel.
I do too. Thank you. Amen to that. We need more of that.
Exactly.
Rise up, people.
Yeah, exactly. Remember to stay updated with all things Revive Ministry through the various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast, leaving with the last quote from Coretta Scott King. Greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members.